Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, October 27th, and we are at Eastline High School for a debate between our candidates for first selectman. My name is Cindy Stallard. As a member of the League of Women Voters, it's a pleasure to welcome you tonight for this debate between Camille Alberti, a Democrat, and Kevin Seary, a Republican. Much appreciation for this evening goes to those who set up our space. Members of the league will be our timers. A good deal of preparation has gone into this debate by many people, and we appreciate this opportunity to share ideas for how to make the town of East Lyme even better. There are guidelines we follow that allow each candidate to express their view and to facilitate sharing ideas, and the candidates have agreed to these guidelines. The order of questions has been determined ahead of time. They have come from constituents of East Lyme. Timers will hold signs up indicating to the candidates that you have 30 seconds, then 15 seconds left to speak, and then stop so that you know how much time you have left to respond. Each candidate is given equal time over the course of the hour. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds for an opening statement, and again 90 seconds for a closing statement. Our event tonight will last approximately 1 hour. Concerning our recordings, the League of Women Voters discourages the use of broadcasting sound bites in paid advertising, as it would make the league appear to be biased. We request that any recordings show the discussion in its entirety. And a couple of things for our audience online. The League of Women Voters strongly encourages all eligible citizens to vote in municipal elections. The decisions made at the municipal level have a direct influence on our everyday lives. Some elections at the local level are decided by a small margin, making every vote important. You can learn more about your local candidates and issues on a website that is sponsored by the National League of Women Voters Education Fund, vote411.org. On this site, you can check out your voter registration status, where to vote, and see a sample ballot. Please check out vote411.org. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Camille Alberti to begin with her opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for moderating this debate, and to those of you watching from home. My name is Camille Alberti, and I am running for First Selectman of East Lyme. This is a unique election because both Kevin and I have in-depth experience in town government. However, experience alone doesn't make for effective leadership. You deserve a first selectman who has a vision for the future and is able to put that vision into action, which will further enhance the quality of our great town. I am that person. Through the many years of service on the Board of Finance, other community service, and as a longtime resident, I have heard your questions and concerns. This year I heard something different. People want change in our town government. I believe I can foster that change, not only because of my background and my credentials, but also because of my commitment to you to provide the strong and steady leadership you deserve. My team and I, along with invaluable input from community members, have created a framework. We call it the 4 pillars of our platform. It's a visionary roadmap that will allow me to hit the ground running when elected first selectman. We will work hard to create a culture of transparency and professionalism, oversee smart development, protect our environment, and support quality education. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin Seary.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for scheduling our debate, and the East Lyme Schools for giving us the facility to do it, and to those watching at home. I'm Kevin Seary, and I'm asking for your support in the election on November 2nd. I have been a member of the Board of Selectmen for the last 10 years and previous to that served 14 years on the Board of Education, 6 of those years as board chair. 37 years ago, I settled in East Lyme after completing my service in the Navy. It was a great decision. I served as a Connecticut State Trooper for 28 and a half years, the last 22 and a half years of which were as the resident trooper in Salem. I have served as a volunteer coach in youth, baseball, lacrosse, and football, as well as volunteering for many other activities such as the Miracle League, American Legion Breakfast, and the Light Parade, just to name a few. I have a deep sense of commitment to the community. My wife, Dawn, is a lifelong town resident. Our 2 sons, Kevin and Chris, benefited from our outstanding educational system. And with the addition of our grandson, Finn, we now have 3 generations living in East Lyme. I've always enjoyed a challenge, and when I'm faced with a problem, solving it is what I like to do. I think the best example is the athletic complex we have here. I was instrumental in bringing that to the town and getting it approved. Thank you, and I hope I can count on your support on November 2nd.
Thank you. All right. And we drew numbers at the beginning, and Ms. Alberti will be the first responder for the first question. At the national level, there's much discussion of the role of police in society. There's concern for burnout of officers, as well as concerns about transparency and police activity. What actions would you take to both care for our officers and protect the community from inappropriate police activity?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe that at the local level that we've experienced the exact issues and problems that are faced in larger cities in our nation. So I feel very fortunate that we live in this community where we don't have those extensive worries. Recently, a grant was awarded to assist the police in obtaining body cameras. So I think that will go a long way towards protecting not only our police, but also the people that are being, the people that are being arrested or a warrant is out for their arrest. I think it's going to protect all the parties going forward.
Thank you. And Mr. Siri?
Thank you.
90 seconds.
Thank you. I think police staffing is of major concern in this town. Last year, East Lyme had the 5th lowest staffing per capita, basically police officer to residents in the state of Connecticut. This year as well, between January and the end of September, criminal cases have gone up 52% in East Lyme this year. There's 93 more criminal cases over that 10-month period than there were last year. We've seen the increase in juvenile crime during the midnight hours. We have some excellent officers in this town, but it's getting more and more difficult. The chief has said his main call for, or concern from the residents is motor vehicle enforcement, and we haven't been able to dedicate that resource to that for speed enforcement right now because of the challenges faced by the staffing. I think what we need to do is look at adding more officers. The chief has a plan, and he came forward with it this year. He requested 2 officers. He got 1. It will help a little, but we still have a long way to go. So I'm hoping that the town will support increasing that as well. Body cameras are an excellent thing. Not only do they help the officer, but they help the citizens as well. When I was a state trooper, we didn't have body cams, we just had dash cameras, and they were very beneficial to both the public and the office and the troopers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti?
We were also rated the 7th safest town in all of Connecticut, and perhaps that's why we try as a community to match resources to what the needs are. So in the past 3 years, we did add a police officer in each of those years. And one of those years was specifically targeted for this traffic control. Now, I suppose that didn't happen because of a few retirements in the force, but we did staff that position for traffic control. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question, we'll start with Mr. Siri.
Thank you.
This question, Catalyzed by incidents of racism and inequality around the country and in East Lyme itself in the past 2 years, many organizations and citizens of East Lyme have urged town officials to devote greater focus to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. If elected, how would you address these calls for policy change in support of a more inclusive and equitable East Lyme?
Inclusion is something we have to strive for. We have to make sure everyone who wants to express their concern, we hear their voices and their ideas. There's a group called SCORE, which has come forward and met with Mr. Cunningham, who's on the Board of Selectmen. We meet with them on a regular basis. We have an open dialogue with them, and we've told them, if you have concerns, contact us. It's worked really well. We're crafting a declaration that addresses racism and its impact on healthcare and a health crisis and so forth like that. We've worked with them, and we have a draft document then. I think the school has done a good job. They've had the equity study. So I think as a community, we're trying our best to move forward. Everybody's voice needs to be heard. Everybody has to feel as if they're included in this community. And I think we're taking strides to do that right now.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti?
Whether or not you believe in systemic racism to be the root cause of societal issues, I think we must acknowledge that racism exists in many forms and manners, and we must continue to make progress towards its ultimate eradication. Although I am not ready to declare racism as a public health crisis, I believe that elevating racism to this extreme level can have an unintended consequence, including waning support for the very important work that still needs to be done. When I think of a health crisis, I think of COVID. And so it's difficult for me to put those on the same level in terms of a public health crisis. But again, there is much work to be done. I think it exists. We've seen it in our own schools, and we need to be taking steps to move forward and eradicate that. So also, that brings me to critical race theory. So I have heard from parents with children in the schools, especially during a time when they were engaged in remote learning, that critical race was being taught. I've heard from the administration and several educators that critical race theory is not being taught. What I would urge is a greater level of transparency to parents and community members so that we understand exactly what's going on.
Thank you. And Mr. Siri.
Thank you. Regarding critical race theory, just that term, unfortunately, acts as a device, it causes divisiveness right now. I hope we can get past that. And when we talk about racism and being a health crisis and COVID, early on in the vaccination process, I noticed there were very few minorities getting vaccinated. So I think it all ties in. We have to make sure and do our best to make sure they're aware of the health care that is available to minorities and people of color in the community.
Thank you. And back to Ms. Alberti. The third question, what efforts would you make to provide more affordable housing opportunities in East Lyme?
Well, we have the 4 pillars of our platform. One is which is called Aligning Development Objectives with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Very specifically, we have objectives outlined there that call for apartment units to be built in single-family homes. Now, this is something that's been brought in front of the community during a public hearing. There was overwhelming support for it at that meeting, and including myself. And I think that those they're called ADUs, accessible dwelling units, is a good way forward in providing more affordable housing without impacting one of our other pillars in our platform, which is protect the environment. The last thing that we would like to see are entire tracts of land being deforested to make room for multifamily, large dwelling units.
Thank you. Mr. Siri?
Right now, I think East Lyme is right at about the 5% mark for affordable housing, which is below what people are seeking. They'd like it up closer to 10%. We have Liberty and Freedom Way, Hope Street, Village Crossing, and we do have a couple others, Deerfield, which is off of King Arthur Drive. But we have a couple more areas which are being constructed now, Rocky Neck Estates, and there'll be a development going in on North Bridebrook Road that we will be providing some additional affordable housing. The accessory dwelling unit, I'd like to do a little bit more of a study onto this right now, because you have to look at the impact that may have on the town. If every single-family unit now could be made into a multi-unit, that could have a huge impact on, or strain on, the education system, public safety, traffic, and so forth like that. So I'm not adverse to this, but I think we need to look at a way in which to do this maybe at a little slower rate, because we don't know what the impact is going to be right now. So I'm not opposed to it. I just think we should look at it more and see what the impact would be if 1 out of every 20 houses did that. So I think we need to look at it a little more closely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see affordable dwelling units as a really good solution to help young professionals be able to afford to live in our town. That's number one. Number two, it is the state that is looking for all towns and cities across Connecticut to reach that 10% affordable housing level. I would like everyone to understand that that's not entirely practical. Because if you have an entire development where you say 30% of the units are affordable and 70 are market rate, you're always going to be chasing the numbers to achieve your goal.
Thank you. All right. And back to you, Mr. Siri. Yes.
I think so.
Yes, thank you. All right. What efforts would you make to increase the tax base in East Lyme? As in, what sort of businesses or industries would you welcome? And are there any businesses that you would not support?
Right now, we have about a 4 to 5% of our town zoned for commercial industrial right now. That's pretty full right now. But we are getting some people coming in right now. We're looking at a new tenant going into the old Bob's Furniture place too. I think we create that environment. I think maybe we have to possibly look to entice people to come in, maybe some tax abatements over the first few years while they're here. Main Street's thriving, and I think what we do is encourage their help to extend up the 161 corridor into the Flanders area, ways to improve our already existing commercial area. I don't think we want to expand that. I think we want to enhance it, and I think we can do that, which will increase our tax base. Also, sort of tied into this would be open space. You reduce the burden on the taxpayer if you have open space and avoid those big developments will come in, which would put stress on the school system and, again, public safety, traffic, and so forth. So that's what I would recommend for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have a history in this town of allowing buildings to be vacant for a number of years. And I believe the reason why that's happening is because a number of years ago, the current administration decided to depopulate the Economic Development Commission, which is a part of our charter. If I were to become first selectman, that is one of the first initiatives I would take. I would repopulate the Economic Development Commission so that we could take a proactive approach in redevelopment of these properties that have languished on the market for years and years. In addition to that, I would consider looking into use of ARPA funds, perhaps to hire an economic development director. During the COVID shutdown, I believe that there was unequal treatment among our business owners in town, and there was no central resource or person that they could go to in town hall to receive assistance, whether it was for payroll protection or whether it was for restaurant assistance. These were all federally available funds that could have gone to small businesses in our town. Some of those businesses had the resources within to tap into that, and some were completely caught unaware. So again, a very uneven playing field in terms of nurturing and keeping our businesses thriving in town.
Thank you. Mr. Siri?
I would disagree with that a little bit because we have a thriving Main Street organization that they did reach out to members of the business community to see who was in need or who might need some assistance. And that did come up the 161 corridor as well, so I think we've done that. We have a great service with that company, with that organization, Main Street. They're kind of our almost economic development commission, and they're doing this without that level of bureaucracy that sometimes, impinges on creativity and so forth. I think they're a great resource, and I think they could help out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I had the 30-second follow-up to that? No? Okay.
I think we started with Mr. Siri,
Mhm.
and then
Okay.
you had 90 seconds, and then
Okay.
I think Mr. Siri, if you have more to say,
I do. Can I have 15
I can
seconds?
give each of you 30 seconds more on this topic.
Terrific. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
let's do that.
I would like to say that several of our restaurants in town received over $500,000 in federal funds, and yet we had some restaurants in town pleading on social media to please come by and order takeout so that they could survive. So while I recognize the importance of Niantic Main Street, I'm not sure that there was an even application to everybody in town. It's sort of who you know that helped you get through the pandemic.
Thank you.
Okay. Regarding that too, in addition to Main Street, I visited pretty much every restaurant and merchant in town during that period to see if they could need help. So, and I won't mention them obviously, but they were made aware of how they could request funds if they needed it. And a lot of them, I also spread the word to, please stop in, visit these places. And it did help in several cases as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Ms. Alberti. Number 5. How do you feel about increasing the amount of land available for open space, such as at Hathaway property? And how should such acquisitions be paid for?
So I am a strong believer in aligning our development objectives with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Again, that's one of our pillars. The POCD, for short, has a land of unique value study that they put together identifying all the properties in town that are open space, and they've rated them in terms of importance of which to acquire. The Hathaway property was rated the #1 property for acquisition should it become available. It has become available, and the town has an opportunity to acquire or purchase 120 out of the 150 acres of that Hathaway property. Recently, grants have been made public that I think that we could tap into, so that price tag of $1 million that we were looking for the town to fund as its portion of the purchase price could even be lower than that.
Thank you. Mr. Siri?
This is a topic we're not going to disagree much on, I don't think at all. I do have a couple. The Hathaway property is something that I think we definitely need to pursue. They're making 120 acres available to us. But right now, one concern I have is the attorney representing the owner and seller also represent the land trust. I think the town should, if we're going to pursue this, get its own attorney to look out on the best interests of the town, make sure that we know exactly what we're buying. I do agree that there's several funding sources. There's several communities that have used ARP funds to help purchase open space. We have a little over $200,000 in our open space account now, so that could be it. So between those two and some bonding and the grant through the land trust, I think is something we should definitely pursue, because we've been told that could be up to 70 building lots up there, and these would not be affordable housing at all. These would be large 1-acre lots, and they would be over our prime aquifer with fertilizer, septic tanks, and so forth like that. So I think pursuing the Hathaway property, as Mrs. Alberti pointed out, is the #1 piece of property in the POCD, which is a great document. We all just unanimously adopted that not too long ago. So I think it's something we definitely need to pursue and constantly try to look for areas where we can expand our open space. We're at about 20% now, and there's a recommendation for about 25%, so we got to go a little ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say that we do have our town attorneys that could certainly represent us in this type of transaction, but what is even more critically important is that when the presentation was made to the town regarding the possible acquisition of this property, 3 or 4 estimates were given, appraisals of the land. What we need to do as a town, if we're fronting some of the money for this acquisition, is to make sure that we get an independent appraisal from the town of East Lyme and not rely on the East Lyme Land Trust.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Siri. We anticipate traffic challenges when the state begins construction around exit 74 on I-95. How will you help minimize the traffic during construction, and would public transportation be more readily available?
One, that's very good, because it's looking like probably, it was supposed to actually start this year, but it slide for a couple of years. I think that's one of the things I've already talked to a couple about, is there a possibility of getting a trolley that could run from the north end of town to the south end of town, because it's going to be very congested. As far as the traffic plan, that'll be determined by the state in conjunction with our local PD as far as rerouting traffic, because it's going to be difficult. It's going to completely revamp that whole area. When it's done, it'll be a much better place, because you'll never have to cut against traffic or cut across traffic to get on 95. There'll be access roads, much easier access in the True Value. And they're even talking about a little bit of an upgrade in that 161 corridor for sidewalks in the area. But it's going to be a tough year or so of construction. So I think having our Public Works Director working with the state officials and the police department, they'll come up with the plan, because these are the experts. They know exactly what to do, the engineers and so forth. So I would trust their recommendations and their insight.
Thank you.
The latest information that I have is that the State Department of Transportation is going to begin this project sometime in the spring of 2023. I think that's very possibly the worst time to begin such a project, because our population in East Lyme and Niantic doubles in the summertime. So first of all, I would like to see if we could arrange a better timing with the Department of Transportation to perhaps start this earlier in the year or later in the fall. Certainly these ideas that you have are great. We have a terrific Public Works Department that I'm sure will do everything that they can to work with the state to make sure that traffic is flowing. Unfortunately, there's only 2 other routes where people can get through town, and that would be the Post Road as well as Route Main Street downtown. And those will probably back up very greatly. I do anticipate that work from home situations will continue even after we've fully recovered from COVID, and I'm hoping that will stem some of the transportation issues that we might face.
Thank you. Mr. Siri?
And you're right, there's really no 2 ways to go around it, because we already know what the 4 corners right here at Flanders, and just going down into Niantic on a normal day right now is you'll back up for sometimes a quarter of a mile. We could probably encourage people in the north end of town to try and head up and go down Lover's Lane or something like that, but then that's going to put a burden on those side roads. So I think that traffic plan that we're talking about would have to try and minimize the impact on the residents on our secondary roads as well, because a large inflow there would be difficult for them.
Thank you. And Ms. Alberti? The design of automobiles is transitioning from gas-powered to electric-powered. Would you support the installation of charging stations in all town-owned property? And would you offer incentives for installation in parking lots owned by businesses such as restaurants or grocery stores.
I absolutely support the installation of charging stations. I think that is the way that the future is going. In addition to entirely electric vehicles, we have the hybrid models, and I think it's very convenient to be able to pull into a shopping center and be able to charge while you're doing your shopping. What I would suggest is taking a look at our zoning regulations and ensure that any large development that is coming into town is aware that installation of charging stations would be a requirement for them to develop. I'm still amazed at, with the very large development at Costco, that there is no single charging station there, and that parking lot is enormous. I wouldn't require small businesses to install charging stations because I think that would present an economic hardship for them, but I would look for grant opportunities to install them on municipal property.
Thank you. Mr. Siri.
It's very good, because I know there's several car manufacturers are talking about, in the not-too-distant future, transitioning to all-electric vehicles. I would like to see if we could possibly, and here we'd have to work with zoning, come up with a plan to, anytime there's an improvement or an upgrade to an existing gas station or similar type facility, that they put in some type of charging station. We've looked at the possibility of possibly in our municipal lot behind the movie theater. There's an area where we could possibly put some places, because right now we have no place in town for an electrical charging, or that there's an electrical charging station. And I do see more and more cars, electrical cars in there. So I would look at some type of grant money. I'm sure there's going to be some type of enhancement or opportunity for towns to transition to that. And we have a thriving beach community too. We have people coming down here all summer. So even possibly in our parks area or by McCook's or Holden, we'll have a couple spots in there for people to come down. So definitely I would like to pursue and look further into that. I think it would be a great opportunity.
Thank you.
I think we're all set. I think that covers it.
Thank you. And Mr. Siri, following up on care of the earth, do you have an opinion on providing compost pickups along with trash and recyclables?
It's not something I've heard of or discussed with the Public Works Director, who's also, our sanitation director as well. But I know he's involved with the Southeast Connecticut Regional Recycle, SCARA is the short name for it, that does a lot of that. So I don't know if that corporation right now is involved in doing that type of research right now. We're looking to improve our ability to recycle, but we haven't really talked about composting yet. They did a little bit at Flanders School several years ago as sort of a school type of event, but that has gone away. So I think it's something we should look into, but it's not something I've done much research on or heard much about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti?
There is a entire underground movement going on in East Lyme in terms of composting. We have a number of farms on the north end of town that incorporate this into their daily activities. We have a number of home gardeners that compost in their backyards. I have heard several people that are environmentally conscious and focused saying that we should implement a composting program in town and make that mandatory. And I think that's a terrible idea. Anytime you try to overregulate or mandate something, there's going to be unintended consequences of that. I think that there are enough interested people that we should pursue a public-private partnership whereby we could get organizations or companies that have experience and have exhibited success in this area to come in and help us launch a pilot program to make composting a reality. There's many, many benefits. in terms of reducing gas house emissions, in terms of recycling, reduction in landfills. The benefits are enormous, and I think that our community is really focused on doing what they can at a local level to make this a reality.
Thank you.
I'd also like to continue to look at that regional approach to it too, because we are surrounded by farmlands in the Salem, Lyme area, and I think if we try to work with our surrounding communities, we could come up with a better solution for the composting thing. And possibly, I'm not looking to overregulate either, but I think that would be a great way to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Alberti, some towns are decreasing the number of polling stations during elections in an effort to save money. Would you commit to maintaining our current number of polling stations in East Lyme?
Well, this is an interesting reversal of a trend, because prior to this year's election, I believe we generally had 2 polling stations, and we are going to 3. And I think the reasoning behind that, from the registrar's, the voters' point of view, is that we want to do everything that we can to ensure that every voter is coming out to vote on election day. Municipal elections are very difficult for us to get out the vote, and having a 3rd polling station is going to hopefully increase the turnout of the voters. Particularly that 3rd polling station that they're opening in Niantic will service the elderly population that is not able to get around as easily, say, as some folks in districts 1 and 3, I think.
Thank you.
I'm very supportive of the 3 polling stations, because we did have them several years ago, but the decision was made to go to 2 to consolidate, and not have to, use as many, to save some money for the polling types of events going on. And it was last year, actually, that we went back to the 3, because we sent out all the literature last year of advising people that it would be at Niantic Center School, and so the ones that used to vote at the community center, because we'd have 2 districts voting in the same place, which the parking lot was extremely crowded, and that's not a good environment when you have a lot of people trying to walk from their cars up to the polling station and then exit. So a decision was made, and I think this came through the Secretary of the State's office too, because I think they came down, talked to our registrars, and it was their recommendation we go back to the 3 polling stations for ease of access for the members of the town that want to vote, and to reduce the congestion as far as the parking lots as well. So I think it's a great thing, it encourages more voting. I'm all for it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
The additional costs to the town, I think, are minimal in order to provide that level of service.
Thank you. And Mr. Ziri, in what ways could East Lyme consolidate services with other towns to improve efficiency and save money?
I think one of the things I just mentioned about SCARA, the Southeast Connecticut Regional Resource Recovery Authority, is one good way. That's a consortium of all the towns in the area. And right now for recycling, for instance, they give us $140,000 subsidy. So that saves us money right there by being part of this consortium. We already share a police boat with Waterford, so that reduces our costs. For our police department, with lots of events that might celebrating Lyme Day, the light parade, where we have a lot of people coming down, need a lot of police officers. We have a mutual assist where they'll send officers to us, which saves us overtime and provides the coverage. And when they have an event, we'll send them there. So I think we've already got several things where we can do that. We also do it with purchasing in a lot of areas too already. And we've actually gotten better, actually in cooperating with the Board of Ed to share, not share costs, but to consolidate purchasing, which has saved us money.
Thank you.
So one of our pillars relates to implementing best practices in town government. And part of best practices in any organization is to benchmark with like municipalities. So I would encourage benchmarking with neighboring towns to identify best practices for sharing of resources. There are probably a number of municipalities that are already doing that, and if we could study that and figure out what would be good for our town, I think that that's a great start. Together to investigate that and research it, but I would also give them some guidelines to look at. So, for example, environmental and conservation concerns comes to the top of my mind. We could collaborate with other towns enrolled in the Sustainable Connecticut program. Perhaps we could share resources of grant writers that would help us in that area. We're a coastal town, but we're just one coastal town among many in southeastern Connecticut, and I think we really need to partner with our neighbors. We need to share resources in order to come up with a coastal resiliency plan. And there's other services that we could potentially look at. For example, if we don't have enough resources to hold as many AP classes as we wanted to in the high school, perhaps we could partner with Old Lyme to be able to provide those types of classes.
Thank you.
Some of that reaching out has already been done. I know regionally, the police departments do a lot of combined training. Some is done here, some is done in Waterford, some is done in New London, so that's done. Our fire departments have regular meetings with each other. So I think we've taken some first steps. I think as we move ahead, especially when you see some of the inflationary things coming, we need to keep thinking outside the box. What can we do to enhance training and things like that? We already share school resources with other towns as well. So.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti, what are your priorities in developing a budget for Eastline?
My priority is to review the process. Right now, it's pretty lengthy. It seems as soon as we approve one budget and set the mill rate, it's time to start planning on the Board of Education budget just a few short months later. So I would take a look at the entire process and look for opportunities to improve that. Of course, we have to be cognizant of our town charter because there are standards and rules in place that help us determine the entire budget process. So before we even get to looking at the process of the budget, we need to take a look at our charter. And that is one of the first tasks that I would like to undertake, is to create a charter revision commission to tackle these exact type of issues.
Thank you. Mr. Siri.
And back when I announced in my candidacy in May, one of the first things I mentioned was a charter revision. I think we do need to look into something like that for a lot of things. People have mentioned about tax collector and town clerk. Do we make those appointed vice elective? So these are things, but a charter revision committee is appointed, given a charge, and then there's a statutory requirement for how long it's open, public hearings and so forth, and then they come back. But getting back to the budget, I think we have a process in place right now where in November or in December, they start reviewing the budget in preparation for moving forward, because it comes to the Board of Selectmen in February and then moves on to the Board of Finance. So I think we have a fairly good thing, but it seems like you're always in the budget process as soon as you finish. So I don't know if there's ways to streamline it, or you really can't streamline it, but I would love to have an opportunity to also work collaboratively with the Board of Ed. Right now, they prepare their budget, we prepare ours. I'd love for us to sit down as a town and Board of Ed, maybe in the September or October timeframe, and start working together so we each know each other's needs. I think that's an important thing to do.
Thank you.
So when I was a management consultant, I happened to be part of a project team that did re-engineer, that was the term that was used back then, the entire budgeting process for a Fortune 500 company. So I have experience in that area. It can be done. I will also say that the tools that we use are antiquated to produce the budget, And we have appropriated funds several years ago for a new accounting software system that still to date has not been implemented. I have years of experience in implementing financial systems, and I think that project would go quite smoothly if I were to be involved with that.
Thank you. And Mr. Siri, some large projects have come to fruition in the past several years, including the boardwalk and the new public safety building. What do you imagine for the next big goal in Eastline?
For the next big goal, I think we have to take a look. We're emerging from COVID. I think what can we do to make East Lyme better, and especially at the town level, more customer service friendly. I think we need to look at digitizing our building and town clerk documents so people can access them from home. And here again, that saves gas, it saves traffic and so forth like that. I think that's one big area in which we can look into for next projects. Also, we have some other projects coming up as well that we need to start looking at. Our community center is 30 years old, 30 plus years old actually. It's going to need a new roof. That's going to be an expensive venture, so we have some capital projects coming by. And I think this dovetails into the ARP, to where at some point in time when the new administration takes over, you sit down, form a committee, and come up with a priority for using those funds that you can use for those facts. I think we could use those funds to help digitize town hall, and I think that's something we should look at very seriously.
Thank you.
Can I ask you to repeat the question, please? I want to make sure I answer correctly.
Yes. Sorry. Some large projects have come to fruition in the past several years, including the boardwalk and the new public safety building. What do you imagine for the next big goal in East Lyme?
Well, I'm not going to use my imagination. I'm going to use my knowledge that the town approved a capital improvement plan last year that is calling for a $5 million replacement of a firehouse in Niantic, a $3 million replacement of a firehouse in Flanders, and an $8.5 million project to implement a new park over on Roxbury Road. These are the projects that are in the pipeline, so to speak. And so I'm not imagining that that's real. And that is something that the new administration is going to have to ensure that the proper project management methodology is in place to ensure that those projects, if they do come to fruition, are handled in a timely manner and within budget, and that everything runs smoothly. We don't want a repeat of what happened with the public safety building project.
Thank you.
I know those are in the capital plan, but things in the capital plan are just usually frequently put in there as a placeholder. I've talked to the chief at the Niantic Fire Station. He has no intention of trying to move forward with a new building in the years to come. He'd like a new roof, he'd said that, but that's it. Same thing with the Flanders Fire Department. There's no urgency, according to the chief there, to put up a new building. And the $8.5 million has been in there for several years. That keeps getting pushed out too because of the difficulty in that process up on Roxbury Road.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti, how have you empowered people you work with to perform at their maximum potential, and how will you apply that skill if elected?
So in my years of management consulting experience, I have made sure that there were stakeholders from every part of the organization that would touch the process. And that is empowering on so many levels. And one project comes to mind that I managed in Canada, and it was for a large automobile client of mine. And I insisted that the then receptionist be empowered to be part of our management team. And that was highly scoffed at, as you can imagine, at the time. And I said, But you have to understand that that is the focal point of all the calls, all the customer complaints, all the networking that comes into that building is going through that individual, and she will have much to contribute to that project plan. And I took it upon myself to take her under my wings and make sure that she had the tools necessary to succeed in the role that we had given her.
Thank you. Mr. Siri?
One of the things I think I've been very successful at in my service to the town is when a problem comes up or identifying a problem and coming up with a solution. The athletic field, several years ago, a group of parents said and it was perfectly obvious, our old athletic complex was in disrepair, and what could we do? So we got together, and I empowered them, sought their input and advice from not only the parents, but from coaches, from town officials, and former and current athletes that used our field. And we came up with a plan. We got ownership, so everybody felt as if they were part of the investigation and the solution. We brought it to the Board of Ed, which I was still serving on at the time, and then to the Board of Selectmen. And now we have this process. People felt ownership. And I think that's one of the key things in getting something done at the local level. When you identify a problem, get a group together, empower them, and encourage them to become part of the solution. And I think that's one of my prime positive points is I can do that. We have some very talented people in this town, volunteers and professionals in our department heads, and they just need that encouragement, and you have to provide them with the resources. That's what we really need to concentrate on doing. If you ask them to perform a project, you need to make sure they have the tools in which to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti?
Agreed. I think I said that as well, that you need to provide the tools and the resources in order for somebody to succeed in the position that they have. But in project management, you also have to have some guidelines, a mission statement. You need to give parameters around the project so that it doesn't go awry. And that's just one example of a tool that can be provided to make sure that the project is taken on by these individuals that are being empowered to do that.
Thank you. And Mr. Siri, do you see a need to develop a policy to facilitate timely work permits for homeowners and small business owners in East Lyme?
Yes, I think we need to do something to enhance people who are seeking permits for their residences, commercial buildings, or whatever, to get those permits on a much more timely basis. There has been a backlog because of COVID. There's a backlog with supplies as well as so forth like that. But one complaint I do hear on a regular basis is that I apply for the permit and I'm not hearing back from it. That's one of the things I would do. I would sit down with the people in the building office day one and say, look, we have a concern. Let's come up with a solution, and let's put it in writing too. What is your goal to make this get better? Because we have, if it's a staffing issue, bring it to our attention. And if it's something other than that, bring it to our attention. But we desperately need to speed up the process in which people can do that, because they're trying to move into homes, get a business started, so we do need to address that.
Thank you.
Certainly, I think there's opportunities for process improvements in any process. So the first thing would be to look at that and look for areas that we could improve in. I also think we should look at industry standards. How long should it take for a certain permit of a certain nature to be approved? What are some of the employee ratios that we have per permits? Is it a full-time employee that's needed for every 100 permits that comes across in a month? What are the standards out there? And once we determine what those are, what I think is critically important is that we establish performance standards for the individuals that are performing this work, so that if standards aren't being met, then we have a trail of why that's happening and we could take corrective action.
Thank you.
I'm fine.
Any other remarks, Mr.
Oh,
Siri?
sure. One of the things I would take under, I would implement very quickly is sitting down with each department head and actually develop a performance review, because right now there's nothing. I think you sit down and have a yearly review with them, and then you meet quarterly to see the progress on it. I think that would do a lot to enhance alleviating these problems of the backup in building permits or any other concerns. If the department head knows what his expectations are, and I think that would do a lot to alleviate the problems.
Thank you. And Ms. Alberti, there have been challenges getting consensus on the public safety building upgrades. And how can citizens have input as decisions are being made on big projects?
I think implementing best practices in town government is going to include our objective of increasing communication for all of these types of projects. So not only should there be community forums to explain the project in its entirety, but there should be progress reporting along the way, and that should be made readily available. Right now, it seems our only mechanism to figure out what the status of a project is to read the meeting minutes and try to ascertain what's going on. Many of our committees' meetings are not taped, so it's very difficult sometimes to get the weight of the meeting inside of these meeting minutes. I do believe that we should have executive summaries that are publicized and published on our town's website so that any citizen can go there and look at any point in time to see where we are on the status of that project.
Upgrading our website, I think, is one of the prime things that should be considered as we move forward with the ARP funding as well, because I do hear from a lot of seniors saying, I don't know what activities are going on in town, or I wasn't aware of, or what's the status of a project in town. I think the executive summary is a good idea, and if you could just post updates on the website. You have access to agendas and minutes, but minutes are at best a small snapshot of what happened at the meeting. They're not a they're not a transcript of what was happening. So I would encourage, as we move forward, to look at using some ARP money to make it more user-friendly. And have a website. Now, you can't maintain, not a website, but a Facebook page or a social media page where people are able to get information on that too. And then request information back too, or pose a question. You know, if you're gonna pose it at 8 o'clock at night, you might not get it back the next day or that night. You may have to wait till the next day if you pose it on a Saturday, not till Monday or something. But I think we have to do a better job of providing people with access to documents and projects that are ongoing. It would help them understand the process a lot better.
Thank you.
Definitely, we need improvements to our website. There, I agree with you completely. But in addition to publishing more information on our website and making it more easily navigatable, there could be other forms of communication that we could use, whether it's tweeting out important meetings from the First Selectman's office, to having a weekly address informing residents of important upcoming meetings and when they're open to the public.
Thank you. It's nearly 8 o'clock, but we started about 5 minutes late. I do have one more question, and then we will have closing statements from you each. So for Mr. Siri, the last question. Do you believe East Lyme should have a Shoreline East commuter railroad station? And if so, where in East Lyme should it be located?
I would love to have a Shoreline East commuter railroad station, but a lot of research has been done, and due to parking requirements and so forth, the only place that is currently been deemed, or to my knowledge, have been deemed accessible or a possibility would be at Rocky Neck. So it wouldn't even have people to near where they would be near the center of town or the north end of town. So I'd love to do it, but I think that the reality of the logistics of it are very difficult right now, because once you get up into Main Street, a hole in the wall, there's just not enough places for a train to stop like that, because it would require a lot of infrastructure. I wouldn't mind if the trains, if Amtrak or somebody would like to help us, that would be fine. But right now, as much as I would love it, I just don't see any place where we could possibly put it.
Thank you.
Not in East Lyme, anyway.
Before my time in East Lyme, it's my understanding that there was a train stop
There
at,
was.
right where the,
Yep.
the Penn and Main Park is currently. And I would have loved to have seen a train stop there instead of the park. And I thought that perhaps there was a way to have some underground parking and shore that up with, engineering to make that possible. So what I would accept as an alternative is a stop at Rocky Neck. I think that's a great opportunity to get people into our town to enjoy the beaches. There's plenty of parking. And I think that is, there are still a lot of citizens in East Lyme that take that train to New York. They either have to go to New London or Old Saybrook or even New Haven, and it's just not that convenient. And I think that if we had a train stop, that could prevent more cars from being on the road, even if your commute was only from East Lyme to, say, New London or East Lyme to New Haven. I think that's a great way to alleviate traffic on the road from vehicles. I would like to see that happen. I haven't given up hope.
It was hope too, when we knew we were going to take down the old gas station. We were hoping that maybe we could, but we were told very quickly that the parking requirements, we just couldn't accommodate them for right there. I'm hoping that maybe in the future it would be nice, because I think we're looking at commuter traffic and travel more and more as time goes on. So if it's a viable option, we'd have to work with the state since it's their property, but I'm not adverse to looking forward to looking further into something like that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your ideas with everyone listening in East Lyme. And at this time, we'll start with Mr. Siri for your final closing remarks.
Okay, thank you. The main reason East Lyme is such a sought-after town in which to live is the people and its sense of community. It is amazing what positive things can be accomplished when you put our residents and community first. I pledge to work collegially and cooperatively with all members of our town and build on our strengths and identify areas needing improvement. My background has prepared me for the first selectman's position. During my career, I was required to enter people's lives at challenging times. Regardless of the complexity of the situation, I was always able to properly and compassionately respond to the needs of those adversely affected. I pledge integrity, openness, honesty, and inclusion in all aspects of town government. I will focus on responsible town growth, responsible spending, provide for a safe community by ensuring proper staffing, training, and resources for our police officers and professional and volunteer firefighters and EMTs, and provide a healthy environment and open space that contributes to everyone's well-being. My commitment to community has always been evident, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 2nd. Let us go forward together and make the best decisions for the town. East Lyme's future is bright. Working together as a community makes it even brighter. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Alberti.
East Lyme is at a crossroads. We are facing challenges such as the effects on our environment and culture from rapid and overdevelopment, and we are still emerging from a pandemic and the continuing recovery from its negative impact on our local economy. However, an unprecedented opportunity is also before us. The combination of ARPA resources, a team of qualified and dedicated public servants, and the right leadership will revitalize our town and make East Lyme a model community. We have a vision that is ambitious, but believe its implementation will steer East Lyme toward a better future for our children and our grandchildren. Tonight, you have heard a little bit about the 4 pillars of our platform, which are creating a culture of transparency and professionalism by implementing best practices in town government, overseeing smart development by aligning development objectives with the plan of conservation and development, protecting our environment, and supporting quality education for all. This framework provides the tools that will place East Lyme on a solid foundation for our future. With over 30 years of experience in private industry and public service, I have the skills, the passion, and the desire to lead our town forward. I have a team beside me who are ready to help, and we are blessed with community members that rise to a challenge at every turn.
Thank you. I'm sorry your time is up, but thank you. Thank you for participating and making time for sharing your views with our voters. We thank the Superintendent of Schools, Jeff Newton, for arranging this space at East Lyme High School, as well as the technology for live streaming, our team at the League for organizing the debate, and Grant Place for technical support, our high school custodians for setting up the space, and all of our constituents for tuning in East Lyme. Thank you. And
Thank
don't
you.
forget to
Thank
vote
you.
on November 2nd.
Very
I
good.
think we're both going to vote.
Thank you.
I think you can rest assured we'll be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.